welcome back to my vlog channel. So today, I don't know why I'm starting so overly perky. I feel like all of my videos kind of start that way. But today, not only am I here chilling in like my usual kind of like main channel area, although I guess this is both channel area. The sun is also going down, so I have lights set up, so I'm hoping it doesn't get too dark in here. But I want to go into a video today that I have wanted to do for a while and I wasn't sure how to broach. It's probably gonna be a very long video, as you can probably see just by looking down on the timeline. I'm predicting the future that it's gonna be me talking for a minute, but I really wanted to go into this topic because this has not only been something that I've been dealing with for pretty much my whole life, and I'm gonna go back and explain to you guys the whole story, but on top of that, it really has consumed my life this last year. It's been a really big, I don't wanna say it's consumed my life, but it's really been a large piece of the pie of my life for this last year. And so I want to explain, I wanna backtrack and go back to the beginning of like my whole story and kind of fast forward the best I can while giving all the little like details I think are pertinent to the story, and then explain what's been going on this year. Now I will say I have been very nervous to not only make this video, but other videos in general. It's funny because I was talking to a few people about this morning, and my mom included, and my mom was saying, like, I was telling her, I don't want to come off as complaining, and I feel like I've done a couple of videos where I've talked about my health, but not that much, you know, into detail. And she was saying, well, I think that when you've talked about videos, if it ever broaches into like the complaining side of things, it seems that way maybe because you haven't given context. It's just like randomly like complaining or talking about it with no context of what's going on. So that's happened in the past in videos where people have said stuff to me like everybody's got it tough, which I like don't for a minute take for granted the health that I do have. I am so grateful for having all of my limbs to be able to get up and walk around. But that being said, I don't think that takes away from the actual pain a person experiences. And the purpose of doing this video is to really just tell the story and hopefully create a conversation. I know in my last video when I talked about a little bit about this and I said I've been having a lot of health issues and I already deal with anxiety, or I have pretty much my whole life. Who knows which kind of came first, like the anxiety or the physical problems and the scoliosis causing it. But either way, that was a very long-winded intro to say, I really hope that because this is something that as long as I'm dealing with it now, especially since I'm actively on the road to try to figure this out, I want to start sharing this with you guys. Actually, I've joked many times with people that like how I've had like, Nikki goes blonde, Nikki goes shopping, that like it would be like, Nikki gets a new back / body. Like, so I want this to be something that I share with you guys because I am actively like trying to figure this out. So I hope that you guys like it and you find it interesting, and I hope we can have cool conversations in the comments, because my last video, holy crap, the comments and the things that you guys were saying were so exciting to me, not because exciting is the wrong word because there was a lot of suffering and pain going on your guys' parts, but reading it and seeing the conversation and the suggestions and the struggles that you guys have gone through for some reason was like the best part of the whole thing, like to get to read that and see that. So also I look like I'm kind of a hot mess today. Like I just didn't want to get ready for this video. I told Dan before I sat down, I'm like, I feel like I like getting ready, but I've been like glammed in all my videos lately. So I'm like, I'm just gonna like sit down and do this. So finally, 4 minutes in, I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna start at the beginning. So when I was about 10 years old, that's probably the earliest memories I have of like real pain starting to kick into my life. You know, like everybody has pain, but 10 years old is when the thing kind of flipped to like, wow, I feel like I'm hurting a lot. So it started off with migraines. I started getting intense migraines, like around 10, 11 years old. And we couldn't get rid of them. So things would happen like I would take, and my parents, I think, were a little unsure of like what to do about it because I was a little kid. So it's like you take painkillers, but then it's like, oh my God, this girl's in her bed. Like I would be in my bed in the dark with a pillow over my head, and it was like, nobody make a sound, don't turn on a light. Like it was so nauseating, like it was horrible. And so I had to go to the hospital a few times because some of those migraines just wouldn't go away. So I would go and they would give me some kind of injection, I'm assuming of like a painkiller or muscle relaxer, I'm not sure. But that's kind of when everything first began. It started with migraines. Now I will say my migraines really started to go away with like a simple dietary change. Like as long as I was eating really consistently, like every couple of hours, I noticed that they would kind of stay at bay. But I bring that up because I actually think that that probably ties into everything. So that's when everything first started. So around age 12, I grew up a dancer. If you've been following my channel for a long time, then you know that I grew up dancing, doing all kinds of dance, ballet, tap, jazz, lyrical, hip hop, contemporary, all that stuff. And around 12 years old, I started having some like leg issues come up. Things like I would get like water on my knees. My knees would swell up a lot. They'd get really puffy and big, and they'd feel very jiggly and loose. And I could take my kneecap and it would move so far back and forth. And it was really weird. And the other weird thing that was starting to happen to my legs was that in dance class, you know, if you've trained as a dancer, one thing that they try to do with choreography and in your exercises for your strength, as well as for the choreography and the actual dancing, is they really focus, at least my teachers did, on like levels. So the choreography would often go from places and positions and moves that were like higher, and then you'd end up down on the ground and like jumping back up. Anyway, so it would be very like, yeah, like levels driven from up to down, or like down and then jumping back up, down, jumping back up. And I remember being in class, I make it sound so like, I think I remember. No, I vividly freaking remember. It was frustrating because all of the other kids in the class could easily do the different levels, both in the choreography as well as when I was actually just doing, like our teacher would do this warm up where we would literally like bend down to the ground and then just jump up with our legs apart, down to the ground, jump up with our legs apart, down to the ground, jump up. So it's kind of like this swinging motion to kind of warm our legs up, get our body pumping, and to get used to like the levels of going up and down, having the energy in our legs, strengthening our muscles, all of that. And I remember there were so many times it happened. No, it wasn't so many times. It was every single time that my legs would like give out on me. And I remember being so embarrassed because it was like I didn't want to believe it. And I remember thinking like, this is all in my head. You're such a drama queen. But they would give out like that. Like I'd be like, whoa, whoa. And sometimes I would fall. Sometimes I would have to like buckle my knees because my muscles would completely give out. And so I had to hold myself from falling. I don't even know why. I might cry in this video. Just ignore it. No, I don't know. But they would give out and I would just be like, okay, just ignore it. Like, and I would try to shake it off and everybody would kind of be like laughing. And it was kind of the joke that like, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of the jokes growing up were like me being a drama queen. And so a lot of these things that I kind of went through, it was a kind of a mental trip because I would convince my, like, you're making this up, like just keep going. So about that time is when I started taking Advil pretty heavily because I started to ache a lot and like deep internal hip aches and knee aches and back aches. And so I started taking a lot of Advil around that time. And, you know, I was dancing a lot. I was dancing a lot, like 8-9 hours a day, and I was cross training. So, well, actually at that point I wasn't cross training. I was just doing classes because it was all on my parents' schedule because I wasn't driving. So around the age of 14, I went off to a dance camp up in Lake Tahoe. It was beautiful. I have a ton of funny stories from that camp, which is a total side note. I was like attacked by geese, ended up like naked in the mud. That's a whole separate thing. Anyways, when I was at dance camp, I was 14 years old. And we were going across the floor, which to people who don't dance, going across the floor is when you learn a sequence of moves that are usually rooted in some kind of technique or there's a purpose for them to either like get your funk back, you're doing like jazz walks across the floor, or like you're doing leaps or turns or a little sequence. So that's what going across the floor is. And you typically do it at the start of like a jazz class or something like that. So we're going across the floor, and one of the things to all my dancers out there, we went tombe, pas de bourrée, glissade, which is just a leap, and then jeté, and then I did a middle leap, which is just your legs out to the side, just like it sounds. And when I landed on my right leg, I landed with my left leg behind me, like you leaped and then you landed. And when I landed, I felt my right hip completely snap. Like that's the best way I can try, was like snap, and I was like, oh, like it was so painful. And I remember, once again, it's funny because every injury I've ever had is accompanied, it's probably not funny, it's probably the way everyone feels if I really think about it, but I was so embarrassed, I was so humiliated that like I just hurt myself in what felt like a really big way in a dance class. So I was like, I tried to just do the rest of the class, but I was like, I couldn't. Like, I was just kind of like, and I ended up like dropping halfway through. I was like, I gotta go back, cobbled back to the cabin, and the rest of dance camp was like torture because I was doing that whole mental thing of like, you're making this up, like you're fine, just keep going, take some Advil, keep going. So made it through the rest of dance camp, hobbling around, skipping pretty much all of my class. Actually, I think I skipped almost every single class after that, except for maybe like one, and it was like I was just kind of walking around in it. So I got back from dance camp and I told my mom what happened. I was like, I'm in a lot of pain, and she took me to the doctor. I had an x-ray. They didn't see anything. And they're like, oh, you just need to rest on it. So a few months went by. Not only was the pain not going away, but the pain was actually getting worse. And on top of the pain, it was accompanied with a lot of like snapping, and the snapping in my hip, like click, 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 click in my right hip, started to get worse and worse, and it started to get more painful. So that was at 14. Over the next 2 years, I found myself at the doctor's a lot because of the fact that it was getting more painful, deeper pops and snaps, and they did a lot of x-rays, a lot of MRIs, and they never found anything. They never saw anything. And I remember them telling my mom, like, there's nothing there, like, we don't know what to tell you. And my mom was like, what? You can feel if you put your hand on her hip and she walks, you feel it going snap, snap, like, and she's saying there's pain accompanying with it, like something is going on here. So basically my mom came to the point, I was 16 years old, and my mom was like, she can't even get up the stairs now. I mean, I could get up the stairs, but it was like I had to fully lean on my left. Like, it was so painful. And I obviously wasn't like dancing anymore. I was trying to dance because literally, guys, dance was like my life. And I started working at around 14. That's around the time I started teaching dance. But I never taught dance in like any kind of advanced way. I taught dance in like 3 to 5 year olds, ballet top combo classes, up to like basic intermediate dancing for teenagers. I was never teaching like crazy dance or anything. So I was still teaching and dealing with it by taking a lot of Advil. I used to take like 10 Advil. I was taking 10 Advil a day by that point. And it was weird because it's like, I felt like in my life, I had been positioned kind of as being a drama queen. Maybe I had built that for myself, maybe kind of in the way that I talked about myself. And my personality is obviously very big. And then on top of that, being told by doctors for 2 years, essentially that you're making it up, that nothing's wrong with you, there is no physical evidence of anything going on. I kind of just felt like, what am I gonna do? Like, I just have to keep going with my life and taking Advil and resting and icing, and I have to keep dancing, like it's in my head. So 16 anyways is when my mom said, she's not making this up, something needs to happen. So she said, I want you to do surgery on her because there's physical therapy isn't helping, it's not going away, it's getting worse. So at 16 years old, I had hip surgery. And basically what they did, because they didn't know what they were going in for, they basically just cut me open. So I have about a 7-inch scar on my hip because they just sliced me open, which, by the way, like, let me not fast forward. So they cut me open and they went in and they found a bone spur, which a bone spur, to those of you who don't know, is when your body like sends calcium to an area to essentially create like a new bone. So I had like, here's my hip bone. I had like a little bone growing out of the side of it. And what had happened was that bone spur had like snapped through my muscle and had wedged its way in there. And so all of the snapping that I was feeling was my bone spur going through my muscle back and forth. I don't know how they didn't see that on the MRI, maybe because it was so small, smaller than maybe what an MRI picks up. I'm not sure, but what they did was they shaved off the bone spur. So they like took a machine, like got rid of the bone spur. And then there was a lot of scar tissue in my muscle as well because I had been walking around for those 2 years on a snapping bone in my muscle. So they got rid of the scar tissue, shaved off the bone spur, stitched back up the muscle, stitched my leg back up. So I had that surgery. It was intense and it was very very painful. It was a very hard recovery. For about 6 months, I was in a walker and I pretty much lived downstairs in my parents' house. Like they just put a bed in the living room and I lived downstairs. And it's funny because I was still working. I was still teaching dance out of my house, which is a whole other thing. If you want to know more about the dance thing, you can go watch my Draw My Life because I kind of explain what that was, but I was teaching out of my house to homeschoolers. And I remember I was like, I can't let this get me down. So like I hired someone to kind of be my hands and feet, and I would verbally like teach from like the couch or like my little rollaway bed. And then the person, my sister or this friend that I had, would kind of like be the hands-on person placing kids places. And I'd be like, all right, first position. So I still taught. That being said, like I said, it was a very, very painful recovery. I spent 6 months in a walker, and then I spent another 6 months after that in crutches. And part of what made it hard was not only like the recovery itself. It's funny, I'm actually like hurting right now as I'm sitting here. So if I like move around a lot, that's what's going on. It's not that bad though right now. But anyways, wow, side tangent. Probably because I'm thinking about it. Like when you think about bugs and you're like, ugh. So part of the reason the recovery was hard was one, because of just, I had had hip surgery. And two, it was kind of more time filled with doctors kind of telling me, not that it was made up, but like, I remember hearing from my doctor, well, first off, when I got out of surgery, they said to me, look, we don't know how that got there. We don't know what happened. So because of that, it could come back. Like, we don't know why you had that bone spur in the first place. So that was kind of like, uh-oh. So anyways, there was that. And when I was going through the recovery, I remember like being on these pain pills and running out and having to get another prescription from the doctor. And the doctor like made me feel like crap. He grilled me. He's like, this recovery shouldn't be taking this long. Like you should be fine by now. And basically asked and insinuated if I was like selling these pain pills. And I'm like, dude, like I remember him making me feel so bad for still being in pain. And I was like, I am in so much pain, I don't know what to tell you, which by the way, fast forwarding, that period of my life makes so much more sense now, kind of having the information I have now, because he was really convinced like this shouldn't be taking you this long to recover, you should be better now, and I like just wasn't. So anyways, took about a year to recover. After that year, I was so gung-ho, like I'm 17, like I gotta get back to dance. So I started doing physical therapy, and that got better. And after maybe like 6 or 7 months or so after that, I was like much better. And my hip, like 6 or 7 months after that year mark, my hip felt so much better. I was like, now's my time to shine. Like I'm gonna do dancing full out. So I went pretty full blown. I was driving at that point. So that's when I started really, really training. So I was dancing, like I said, 7-8 hours a day. At that point, by the way, in the earlier point when I said I was dancing 7 or 8 hours a day, I was confused. Like I was still in school. So I was only dancing like 4+ hours a night. But at this point, I had actually taken the exit exam in high school. So I was already done with high school. So I had more time on my hands. I was working. I wasn't in, like that was pretty much all I was doing was working and training. So I was teaching dance. I was taking outside gigs, doing choreography, and then I was training. So I was dancing like 8 hours a day. And then I was cross training. So I was doing like weights at the gym. I was taking 1 to 2 spin classes a day. Like I was like in it. And I was doing that. And about, I'd say maybe right around after a few months of getting back to dance, sorry, that took a second clarifying the timeline. And this is a whole separate thing that I won't go that much into, but you've heard me talk about this before if you've been following me everywhere for a long time. I was back at dance and I was doing dance competitions, and my sister and I went to a dance competition one weekend. And at this dance competition, it was at a really old school and it smelled really weird, and everybody kind of started getting sick when we were there. Like a bunch of people got bloody noses. I got a bloody nose. I never had bloody noses. And when I got back from the dance event, I had like consistent bloody noses for the next couple of weeks. And right around that time too, my sister started getting really sick, like really sick. Her hair started falling out. She had no energy. And to fast forward that for the next couple of months, my sister just was struck with some like mystery illness. And about 2 or 3 months later, I came home from dance class one night and it was like I had hit a wall. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm sick. Like, I think something is wrong. I just felt like something was wrong. And I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I don't feel good. I think something's wrong. And after that, it kind of all went downhill. And I ended up getting the same type of sickness as my sister, which was a whole nother thing. My sister ended up being sick for about a year. I ended up being sick for about 8 months. And doctors, once again, couldn't figure that out. And that's the video that I made a whole separate video about, saying that basically what ended up happening was after we had gone to all these doctors that had written books, we had gone completely through Kaiser, our whole HMO, out of network, everything. My parents ended up discovering this doctor in San Francisco named Dr. Cathcart, I believe. And he was a pioneer, or studied right under the pioneer of vitamin C therapy, which is something that is kind of controversial, but in my opinion is not actually backed by any research. It's just something that people spout out, that basically the theory is that high doses of vitamin C, that your body, if you need vitamin C, your body will use it and basically absorb it and help your immune system work better for anything, for any illness that your body is battling. But that if you don't need the vitamin C, you will actually get rid of it because it's water soluble. And by get rid of it, I mean have diarrhea. So we saw this doctor in San Francisco, ended up being like a miracle game changer. We went on like intravenous vitamin C of like 150 grams a day, which, to put that into perspective, one emergency pack is 1 gram of vitamin C. So we were intravenously doing 150 grams and then orally with pills taking, about 100 grams of vitamin C a day. So we were doing about 250 grams total. And after about 3 days of being in his clinic, my sister, who was actually carried into the clinic, walked out. Like, she couldn't even walk anymore. And I remember at the clinic, we were like, what? Like, my mom was like, what do you think they have? Like, just desperate. And my dad had taken off work. Like, his boss was so generous and basically told him, like, your kid's health is what's most important. Like, take the time off. Your job will be here for you. So, like, my parents were in emergency mode. And we left that clinic. She walked out. I walked out. The vision is like a snapshot in my brain where I knew, like, all right, like, things are going to be okay. So basically after that, we weaned off the vitamin C over the next couple of months naturally, meaning that we let our body tell us when we had enough. So like, you just take it to, to your threshold. So basically once you hit the point where your stomach starts gurgling or you have diarrhea, that's how you know that's your tolerance. And your tolerance changes depending on your health. So the sicker you are, the higher your tolerance is, like the more vitamin C you can take before anything happens. And the healthier you are, typically a healthy individual can only take like 3 to 6 grams a day because their body doesn't need that much because they're healthy. But if you're burning through ascorbic acid faster because of stress or illness, you need a lot more. So that was a total side tangent. This is literally going to be the longest video I think I've ever put out. Wow, now you guys know why I'm actually on YouTube, because I can talk. I should have a podcast. Anyways, so everyone's like, no, we don't want to hear you talk anymore. So, okay, so I got healthy after a few months, and I was very frustrated by that point. I was like, this kind of sucks. Like, in my heart, I want to be so active, but I had this hip injury that lasted me for years. And then I came right out of the hip surgery, pumped and stoked on life. And then I get this weird illness. So like, once I got better, I was like, wow, the last few years have been pretty crappy in like the physical activity department. Which, by the way, just once again, backing up, I'm just so lucky to have what I have. I just feel like I have to say that again. Like, I'm so happy to have the health that I have. I just feel like this deserves like a midway point disclaimer of saying that. So I ended up getting back into dancing that winter. So it had been about 8 months again, and I was I was 18 years old at this point, and I started dancing again. And I think the problem is I never actually built back up. Like, in my head, it was just like, oh, back to being an athlete, versus like, you've taken a long time off. You can't go 0 to 100. You have to slowly work your way up. And within the first couple weeks of being back to dance, I was at a dance class, and I was doing a turn, and my left knee just completely dislocated, like went out, snapped back in, and it was so shocking. And I remember I like fell to the ground in dance class, and I was once again like so embarrassed. And I remember them being like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine, I'm good." And I like slid over to the mirror on the floor, and I remember I I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I don't want anyone looking at me. Like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And it was awkward because it was a really big class at a place called Millennium Dance Center. If you're a dancer and you know where that is, it was in the Dome, back when they had the Dome, if you know what the Dome is. So I'm like sitting near the mirror and everyone's like staring at me. And I'm like, I'm good. And tears are like streaming down my face. And they're like, okay. And I think the teacher picked up on the fact that I was just like, just dance. Like, I can't. So I like crawl a few feet over to my dance bag, grab my phone, and I call my dad. And I'm like, Dad, I need you to come pick me up. Like, I've dislocated my knee. Something is bad. And I remember he was like kind of annoyed at the moment, which he ended up feeling totally bad when he got there and he saw how messed up my knee was because it was like a huge football all swollen. But he came down, picked me up. We took me to the doctor. They were like, yeah, your knee dislocated. It's real weak. We'll get you in physical therapy. So I got approved for physical therapy, started going to physical therapy. It helped. I remember after like a month or so, I was like, wow, like I've never done physical therapy where it was such a distinct, like, this really helped. And I started doing it. I was like, I'm going to be good to go. And then the doctor cut off my physical therapy. He's like, you're good now. You can do the rest at home. And I remember being like, but they do a lot of like electrical like treatments to me and like ultrasound and massage. Like, and he was like, you're fine. You're fine. Cut me off the physical therapy. A week and a half later, I dislocated my knee again. So to really fast forward through a chunk of time, I ended up dislocating my knee like a bunch of times over the next little while. And I also had like a work injury thrown in there in the mix. And I'm kind of confused, like looking back, the timeline of all of those injuries are a little bit blurry, like which one, like the timing of when it happened at work when I was working at Universal, the timing of my knee surgery. I ended up going to Singapore, but it was within like a couple year time period of like physical therapy, having a knee surgery. My guess as to why my knee popped out was because I thought, oh, it must be from hobbling on my left knee from my right hip being injured. I must have put too much pressure on it and then it dislocated. So they ended up having to do a knee surgery on me. And I ended up having a lateral release because they said that the muscle running down the side of my leg was so tight that they needed to loosen it so that it stopped pulling my kneecap to the left. So they did a lateral release, which means they just kind of cut the muscle to let it like stretch a little bit. But then in my kneecap, they also found that there was a lot of like grungy cartilage that was kind of like scraping around, and part of my kneecap had chipped off. So they had to actually remove part of my kneecap. It wasn't that big, but it was like a little chunk of my kneecap. So they got rid of that. That rehab was also very difficult. I was married to Dan at this point. This was in my early 20s. The first injury, by the way, funny enough, actually happened only about like a couple weeks after Dan and I first like officially met, like after I was 18. And so that's kind of a fun fact that's not so fun. So fast forward a couple years later, I think I was like 22 or 23 when, wait, how old am I right now? Oh my God. No, so I was younger than that because I'm 29 and I've been on YouTube for 6 years, and it was so I was 21. I was about 21 when I had my knee surgery. So after that, recouped, my knee still gets sore like today, but it's crunchy when I walk, and sometimes it feels like someone has taken a baseball bat and like hit it, like it's got a really deep soreness on certain days, but for the most part, it helped. My knee has never popped out of place since. So that being said, all of that backstory being said, we are now catching up to current times and what has been going on in recent years. So, okay, so I just had to change out my camera battery, so hopefully I can pick up where I left off. So getting into current times, this is where the story, yeah, just like it sounds, becomes current. So I started YouTube, and probably one of my favorite things about when I got on YouTube, one of them, honestly, there's like a list of favorite things about when I got on YouTube, but when I first got on YouTube, probably one of my favorite things was the stress alleviation that came with not having my whole job depending on me being able to be extremely fit and active, because I was like, wow, like even if I have an injury, I can still sit and edit, like so cool. And it was such a blessing. And on top of that, it just happened to be something I'd been doing my whole life anyways. Like over Thanksgiving, we just watched all the old videos I used to make. Everyone was actually laughing because they were saying, it's funny, you never put yourself in your videos growing up. I was like, I know, like I was really all about like just directing things with my sisters. But point being is that I've always like done this. That's another side thing. So when I first started, that was kind of my perspective. But because I came from being a dancer, an athlete, I still was very active and working out and training. And you guys know from watching my lifestyle videos, all of my like fitness this and fitness that, I've always just been very active. I'm off to the gym, I'm off to train, I'm off to Pilates and yoga. Ow, that hurt. And just doing all of that. And so I started, my YouTube channel, trucking along, those are all the reasons I love it. And about 2 years ago, all of the sudden, I started getting some snapping in my hip, and the snapping had been completely gone since I had that surgery at 16. So it was about a decade of no snapping. And I remember being a little bit like, oh crap. I remember like the first day I felt it and I was like, what was that? And I just remember being like, maybe it was a fluke. Like, it's cool, whatever. And I just started to get it more. Like, it'd be like a month or two and then I'd feel snapping again. And I was like, what is that snapping? And started happening again, and it just started getting more frequent. And about a year ago, it started to just scare me a lot because it started to come with pain. So there were days where like the snapping would come again, and I'd be like, oh crap, the snapping's back, and then it would start to ache, and I was starting to have to like hobble and like taking walks, which like walks, if you follow my Instagram for a long time, I would say like sunset walks are my favorite. And there'd be nights we're trying to go on the walk and it would just like, I'd be hobbling home. And so about a year ago, my mom was like, look, you're finally making an income where you can afford to actually go and seek out the solution to the problem. Which, side note, I feel like as I even like say you're making an income, it's like, I feel like I just owe you guys a huge thank you, because that income comes from the fact that you guys actually watch and hopefully enjoy the videos that I've been making and learning to make and my evolution over the years. So I just feel like I had to say that too, first off. So last year my mom was like, you're finally making money to where you can put it into the investment of figuring out what is going on. So last year, I decided to see a physical therapist who I heard like insane things about this woman. Like, oh my gosh, like I had back surgery. They said they didn't even think I'd walk again. And she had me fixed within a couple of months. I was like, oh my God. So I started seeing this woman, and actually Dan started seeing her too, because every time I ever get involved in anything, I'm like, Dan, you try it too, come on. And he had a couple of weird things, like a clicking jaw that he had for actually about a decade as well. And in the first couple of sessions, she did a really thorough breakdown and history of what my history had been, my medical history with my body. And she was like, she's like, this is going to be fine. Like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to fix you. Like, we got this. I'm really confident. And I remember feeling two ways. Part of me was very excited, very like, oh my gosh, like she's going to fix me. And then part of me was also kind of like, been there, done that, heard that before. You know what I mean? Like I've been in so many doctor's appointments over the years, and it's like they think it's easy and then they dive in and they're like, actually, we have no idea what's going on. So I felt very like two ways. And so we did the whole thorough breakdown. Fun little side story. It took her like a couple of sessions with Dan, and then his clicking and his jaw was gone after like a decade. It just left. It was just a muscular imbalance. And she started working with me, and there wasn't really much progress. And I was like, I don't care. Like, this is where I want to put my money. Like, I'll come as often as I need to come. So I started going like 3, 4, 5 days a week, I think a couple times, and really doing everything. And after a couple of months, I think she was a little bit like, what the heck? Like, I thought this was going to be fixed by now. So she was like, I want to bring in another doctor, and I think it's structural with you, so I want to bring in a chiropractor. Now, I was already seeing a chiropractor. I had been seeing one since I was about 15. Well, I think I had started seeing my other chiropractor before my hip surgery. And then I had my hip surgery. This is a little detail left out. And it turned out this is what she thought. She was like, I think, my previous chiropractor, she's like, I think you have a short leg. Wow, this is a big detail I forgot to put in there. So this was when I was around 15. She was like, I think you have a short leg, and I think that the leg length discrepancy caused your pelvis to tilt which means that the muscles and the tendons that are running down that leg became super tight because you're not supposed to be that tight. It's supposed to be a little more lax and even. And then the rubbing of the tendon and the muscle on that tight area causes the body to send calcium to that area to protect itself, but it ends up building up a bone that tore through that muscle. So that was my chiropractor's like conclusion. So I had been in a heel lift for like 13, 14 years. And my physical therapist, when I was seeing her, after a few months of her being like, hey, I feel like this should be fixed, she was like, I want to bring another doctor in and I want to bring this other chiropractor in. And I was like, okay. And we basically came to the conclusion together, like, look, this other chiropractor that I've been with for a long time, like, she's taken care of me, but I haven't seen any forward movement in a good direction. So it's I think we both kind of decided it was time to get other opinions. So I started seeing this other chiropractor that was working with her, and they did some other x-rays on me to really get an idea of like what was going on in my back and my pelvis. And by this point, after that first couple months of her being like, I don't know why you're not responding, she had already kind of developed the theory, like, I think you have scoliosis. She's like, I clearly see there's a curve in your back, which no one had ever thrown out the word scoliosis to me ever. Like, I had never heard that. And also another side note that you should probably know in this story is that my dad has very similar body issues. His developed later in life, and they're not exactly the same. I have like a couple of extra things that he doesn't have, but as far as the pelvis tilt and the supposed leg length discrepancy, we both have that in common. So what was also interesting is when I first started seeing her, she asked me if I had any low back pain, and I was like, not really, like some, but not really. And she was like, that is fascinating, because if I didn't hear any explanation from you and I just saw your body, I would assume that you were in a ton of pain in your lower back. And I was like, that's not, I mean, a lot of my pain is more localized to those joints and my upper back, I would say. So I saw this chiropractor. He ended up doing all these x-rays, and we saw like a bunch of things were off. Like my neck, which is supposed to curve back, not only was straight, but it actually was like inverted, like it was curving forward. My back did have a curve to it. And they took x-rays of me in the heel lift as well as out of the heel lift. And they took the x-rays of me standing as well as me sitting, because gravity can affect your body differently, I guess, in different positions. And what they really wanted to see with the heel lift versus out of the heel lift was like what happens to the body. If there is a leg length discrepancy, then in theory, my back should kind of straighten out a bit when I put the lift in my shoe. And then when I take the lift out, my back should get more curved. But what they found was that nothing really changed that much. And in some ways, in the x-rays with my heel lift, my back actually got worse, and it wasn't like my pelvis actually straightened out that much. Like, it helped a little bit, but it was very weird. It didn't really make much sense. So anyways, they ended up coming to the conclusion together that I did not have a short leg, that it turned out that they thought that the short leg was my body actually compensating for something else going on. And so it was essentially a giant muscular imbalance pulling my pelvis up to the right and causing my body to fake a short leg as well as fake scoliosis. So I started a whole treatment protocol with the chiropractor as well as with my physical therapist. Spent an arm and a leg, which was pretty depressing, but I know like that's just the medical system. People spend a lot of money trying to figure out what's going on. So started a whole treatment protocol, and I honestly have spent this year, so that started last year was when I first seeked out my physical therapist, and then started seeing the chiropractor early this year, like February, March, somewhere in there, maybe April. Started a whole treatment protocol. I was always very diligent about my exercises. You've probably seen on Snapchat me using head weights to kind of like restore the curve, because that was also one theory, that because my neck was so inverted that my head is forward, and for every inch your head is forward as opposed to being like aligned over your shoulders, you add like I don't even remember how many pounds of weight, like gravitationally, to your body. So it puts a lot of muscular stress on your body because that's not where your head is supposed to be, which is part of the issue with people being on their phones and on their computers, because we're not supposed to live there. We're supposed to be up and our head is supposed to be over our shoulders. So the theory was like, we need to recenter your head. We need to get some mobility back in your upper back, because my upper back was also very hunched and had started to develop bone spurs as well. So like, we need to get the mobility back in your upper back, and we need to get your neck back over your shoulders. And we feel like when we do that, your muscular imbalances will start to change and you will start to feel better, and your pelvis will level out. So during all of that, they were like, we don't think you actually have a short leg. We think your body's faking it, and you need to be out of the heel lift. And we think that the heel lift might have caused more damage than good in other ways in your body, because you were treated in a way for something that, like a problem that didn't actually exist. Like a compensational pattern was basically just favored even more for the last 13 years. And, you know, that's weight training and spin classes and like just all the training that I did over 13 years. So they took me out of my heel lift, and I need to sip of my freaking water. I feel like I've been talking like a mile a minute. So early in the year, they took me out of the heel lift, and that's kind of when like all hell broke loose, because that was a like very painful process. So my heel lift was only about like this big. It was like half an inch-ish, maybe a little less than that. But that much consistently on one side of your body, like you can imagine, it makes your body everywhere behave differently. So after 13 years of that, taking me out of it, like it was guys, it was painful from my head to my toes. Like everything ached. Getting out of bed every day, it was like gravity was just so heavy. So anyways, I got taken out of the heel lift. They ended up putting me back in the heel lift a little bit later because they were so freaked out by how my body was reacting, like so in pain, the snapping got worse, blah, blah, blah. So they put me back in. But like through other stuff, which I don't really remember how this transpired, they were like, no, we really think you need to be out of it. So then they took me back out of the heel lift, and both sides came with so much pain. Getting out of my heel lift came with a lot of pain. Getting back into my heel lift came with a lot of pain. Going back out again came with a lot of pain, and that was all over the period of a couple of months. Just earlier in the year, like early summer, late spring. And that was that. So basically, I've been out of my heel lift now like 6 months, something like that, 7, I don't even know how many months it's been. And doing all of my exercises very faithfully. And my physical therapist, well, I guess before that, I have been in like way more pain in the last few months than I have been in a long time. And my ears are getting, I feel myself like trying to not choke up in this whole video. And so like my ears are getting all hot. So anyways, I have been in a lot more pain this year than I was previously. And that's been hard. That's been frustrating because I don't know if that's just the natural route my body was going to go, or like if it's a good sign because things are healing, or if it's like we started messing with everything and my body's just freaking out. I don't know. Point being, I got to the point where I've been in way more pain, and my physical therapist has watched it, and it's very discouraging to go and someone seems very excited to help fix you, and you have to show up and be like, I don't know, like, sorry, I'm still like really hurting. And like, you kind of feel bad telling them that because they're trying really hard, and you also feel like a drama queen, or like you're making things up and you're just impossible and no one can fix you. So basically, she came to the conclusion, she was like, I think you have scoliosis. And there's a brace called the spine core brace that I mentioned in my last video. She's like, I'm kind of starting to think you just need help, like getting your body in the right position. She's like, we work on you, you do these exercises, but then you go back to your regular life and you still get in those same, you fall back into those compensational patterns when you're sitting, when you're walking around. And she's like, but I feel like if something was able to hold you all the time, you could possibly heal faster and actually get better that way. Now, to everyone who didn't watch my previous video, spine core, to update you, is supposedly the only dynamic scoliosis brace that exists in the world. So traditional scoliosis braces are hard shell, And a spine core brace is basically consists of a bunch of like poles and straps and levies, I don't know what you'd call them, that allows you to do everything you would want to do, dancing, training, anything. And it just kind of pulls and holds everything in place. And you can wear it underneath your clothes. So I was very like, okay, at first, at the very beginning. And then once I started Googling it, I got real excited because I started finding like video testimonials and blog posts of people saying things like, I didn't know that life could exist without pain. Like, I've lived my whole life in pain, and now because of spine core, my whole life has changed. And getting emotional. So I got really excited, and I was like, here we go, I'm gonna go get this brace. Like, and people would kind of complain online about wearing the brace. I'm like, I don't flipping care, I'm gonna wear it all the time, I'll sleep in it, like, I don't care. So I went to this spine core appointment about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and when I went to this appointment, it was me, it was Dan, it was my physical therapist, and my dad came because my dad, like I said, has a lot of the same problems, and he has never had anyone tell him he had scoliosis. And he was like, what the heck? Like, what is this? What is this appointment going to be like? So he came down as well, and we all went to the appointment, and I met with the doctor, and he did a physical examination on my body himself, like with his eyes, and then I did a set of x-rays. And when I was in the exam, you know, he said to me, he's like, well, I definitely see a curve before the x-rays. He's like, but it's such a tiny curve, like it's nothing to write home about. And I think because at this point I was so convinced, like, no, I have scoliosis, that I was just like, nothing to write home about. Like, this has been like, how old am I? So 10, this has been like 19 years of pain. Like, what do you, nothing to write home about. Like, obviously it's doing something, which part of me still kind of feels that way, but I'm fast forwarding. So, he does the x-ray, and he basically ends up finding through the x-ray, like he ends up looking, and he's like, okay, here's what's going on. He does all the measurements. He's like, you only have an 8-degree curve. Spine core, like, can't treat anyone with less than a 15-degree curve. The product, I guess, the brace is so rudimentary, I guess would be the right word, that it would be the equivalent of like taking a weed whacker to try to like do like an artist's like bush, or like to fine trim the bush. It's like, it's a weed whacker. It's like going crazy. So like my back is like a goal back for someone who would get in spine core. They typically deal with people like, I have a 52% curve, like crazy stuff. And for them to go from that kind of curve to only an 8-degree curve is literally life-changing. So he said, he's like, spine core literally won't do anything for you. He's like, I would love to send you home with this. Or he, you know, like that's, I do it all the time. He's like, but I won't sleep at night if I send you home with this, because I know that it won't work for you, because it doesn't work for curves that are that small. And he also said to me, he was like, I don't actually think you have scoliosis, which is something that they had kind of theorized themselves as well, my chiropractor and my physical therapist. He's like, I think that your body is compensating for something. I don't think that the actual deformation, I don't think that's the word, is coming from your spine. Whereas like with regular, like people who really have like idiopathic scoliosis, which means scoliosis that you're born with, essentially, it's like, it's the spine. It's an issue of the spine. He was like, I don't think that you have scoliosis. I think that you're compensating for something. Which, like I said, had kind of been their theory. And then he proceeds to tell me, he's like, I want you to see this atlas specialist. So the atlas is a bone at the top of your spine. It's actually the top bone. And is someone calling me? Oh my God, literally, I'm getting calls from San Juan Capistrano all flipping day, and no one's there when I answer. Woo! Anyways, the atlas is the bone at the top of your spine, and it looks like a little bowl almost, and it has 2 holes at the bottom of the bone. And that bone is what holds your skull in place. And then your brain stem comes out of those little 2 holes and then runs like, it's your spine, it's your nervous system. So he said to me, he was like, if that is not in the right place, if it's twerked, rotated, the way that it moves, it can move side to side, it can move front to back, and it can also move like this. So it can be twerked any of those ways, and if it's tweaked any of those ways, it can affect two different things. One, it can affect you muscularly, because if it's not holding your head the right way, your body will recruit other muscles to keep your head on your body. Your head weighs like something like 13 to 17 pounds, depending on the size of your head. And your brains, how smart you are, just kidding. So it will recruit muscles, so it can mess you up muscularly because your body will like try to hold it. But it can also mess you up like neurologically, because if the holes where your brainstem is coming out of are being like pinched because it's like tweaked or whatever, then the signals that your brain sends the rest of your body can be messed up. So it can mess with anything and everything that your nervous system handles, which is everything. So digestion, pain, anxiety, depression, anything. So he told me that. At first, I felt many different things. One of the things I felt was like, this is a load of crap. This guy didn't hear me. Like, he's not realizing how serious this problem is. Like, I felt like he was really downplaying and not understanding like how much pain I'm in. I mean, one of the things he said to me right at the bat when he was like, he goes, hey, we have this whole series of exercises that you might benefit from called the Schroth method. And I was like, I kind of went like that. And he goes, you're not really an exercise person, are you? And I was like, no, I'm really an exercise person. And not only have I been literally doing exercises for the last year, but on top of that, I didn't respond like this. I kind of responded a little differently though. But I guess if you saw this video, you'd know what was going on in my head. But on top of that, like, my physical therapist has been having me do the Schroth method for like the last few months, because she had already gone ahead and researched all of that. We had done a couple things from like Egoscue, even though I haven't done the whole Egoscue program. So she kind of jumped in and she's like, oh, we've actually been doing Schroth method exercises. And he's like, oh. So I felt that way. I felt like very misunderstood, not like the doctor just didn't get the pain that I was in, as well as all of the methods I had taken. You want to know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of when I had cystic acne, and like if you pay to go to a specialist or something, and they're like, have you tried Proactive? And you're like, of course I've tried Proactive. Like, and it's just, that's what it felt like. I was like, or they're like, are you drinking water? I'm like, of course I'm flipping drinking water. I made a cup, I drink so much water. So that's kind of, speaking of which, that's kind of the way that I felt in this appointment. I felt that way. I also felt a little weird because about a year prior to that, I had read stuff online of like this bone in your neck affecting your hip, and often mimicking, the pelvis would mimic that bone that was in your neck. But when I brought it up to my physical therapist, I didn't understand enough what I was reading, and she hadn't heard of this either, and I didn't press because I'm not a doctor and I didn't know what I was looking at, but I had actually already read of that. So I felt a lot of different things. Like, I heard about this a year ago, like, I can't believe we didn't investigate this, but then also like there's no way that is causing all of these problems. Like, are you kidding me? So I left. I was really discouraged. My physical therapist and I, like, she actually sent me the nicest text afterwards, just being like, we're gonna figure this out. Like, your body doesn't do this for no reason. Like, just being really nice. So I literally called that night and booked the appointment with the Atlas specialist for the following Tuesday. I had a rough night that night. I was feeling real sorry for myself, crying a lot. I was also actively in a lot of pain. So I think the disappointment of the appointment, expecting to come home with a scoliosis brace, which a lot of people would say this is good. And my physical therapist actually said that to me. She's like, this doctor saved you a lot of time, money, and disappointment, which is true. But in the moment, it was like I was so hyped for a potential solution. So it was that combined with just literally hurting from my head to my toes. So, anyways, so the next morning I woke up, and I was actually supposed to film that day. And when I woke up, I literally was like, I am in a lot of pain. Why am I putting this off? Like, maybe this sounds bad, guys, although I know you guys all understand from the comments. I was like, I don't even care. Like, why am I going to work when I'm in this much pain? Like, if everything goes to ruins because I try to take care of my health, like, whatever. It's also kind of scared me at points too. Like, you know, when you're dealing with your health stuff, it's hard to not get a little scared at points. Like, what is going on? So anyways, I woke up that morning. I was like, that's it. I'm calling this lady and seeing if she can take me today. Like, why am I waiting till Tuesday? It doesn't make sense. So I called and I'm like, hey, can you fit me in today? She's like, actually, I could take you in an hour if you could be here. I'm like, done. I'm coming. So I go to this woman. She didn't give me a whole lot of info. To be honest, I never really got a whole lot of info out of this lady in general. Super sweet though, if you're watching. I always get worried I'm gonna say things someone's gonna watch, so not being a hater, we just didn't talk that much about the Atlas. And I think also too, Dan made a good point, like she's not my doctor, she's an Atlas specialist. So I was very like coming from a place of desperation, like, do you think this could help? Like, is this gonna change anything? And my physical therapist was actually supposed to come with me to this appointment, but I booked it so fast, she wasn't able to come. I was just like, I gotta go now. So she did the x-rays of my Atlas and saw that it was tweaked, but only by like 2 degrees. So she did the adjustment that literally felt like nothing. Like if you YouTube Atlas adjustment, it looks really scary because it looks like this big needle thing that comes down. You're like, ah, and then it goes there and then it's all tap and you don't feel a thing. So had the little adjustment, sat up, instantly felt like someone had taken my head and moved it, and like everything was like this, like crooked. I was like, whoa, weird. When I left the office, I felt like maybe I was walking more even. And the next day I had a shoot for a brand deal that I was doing with Vicks, like Dayquil, NyQuil. And it's actually a really fun video and I really hope you guys get to see it. It's going to run as like a pre-roll on videos. Dan and I did it together. And I was there all day, and usually like through my whole life, because I've been doing like on-set type things for a long time, when I show up, I kind of just associate like being on set with pain because I'm on someone else's schedule. It's like I'm probably going to be hurting. And I didn't really hurt at all that day. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I was like a 2, which was pretty amazing. And I was like, is this like what's going on? And the next day I basically just felt like on Sunday, I felt exhausted. I slept like most of the day on Sunday, which is not like me. I do not take like naps in the middle of the day or anything. I slept most of the day and I was like, this is weird. Maybe my body's healing itself, because that's one thing you'll read if you read about Atlas adjustments, is that it's not just about the muscular adjustment of like your brain being center or your head being center, but it's also about the fact that your brain can now send proper like electrical signals through your brainstem because it is even now. So they say that when you get the adjustment, you're literally like starting the healing process because now your body can like function properly. Whatever, it kind of all makes sense. It also kind of all feels like crazy talk, you know, like really that tiny little thing. Basically, as the week went on, I ended up being in a lot more pain again, and I've definitely been dealing with pain still since then. I went back for a follow-up last week where they do another set of x-rays to see if you like held the adjustment, and she took the x-rays and she's like, yep, you held the adjustment. And I'm like, so now what? And she's like, I just say just let your neck be. You can start working with your physical therapist again. And yeah, and so I'm kind of like, by the way, Dan got his adjusted too, just because, like I said, I dragged Dan into everything I'm doing. And on the x-rays, this is the thing. Dan's was more off than mine. He was 5 degrees off. And so, like, if it did end up being it, I guess I wouldn't be that shocked, because part of me feels like, well, pressure over time, and I was going through growth spurts, and I was very athletic, like, maybe it was just like, you know, like when maybe it was basically like my tires were slightly misaligned, but I was driving 600 miles an hour. And so even with a slight misalignment, driving 600 miles an hour, you wear stuff out. Like maybe that is what was going on. But this kind of brings us to present time. I am not quite sure what I'm going to do next, because I have to get back to my physical therapist. She actually texted me, but she texted me for us to like come and meet again, for me to come meet with her again. And I didn't reply because I was like, so like there was so much I had to say and I was so upset. I was like, I just got to tell her in person. So basically where I'm at now is I am going to go back into physical therapy, and we're going to regroup and figure out like, well, what's the next thing that we could do or should do? What's the next avenue that we go down? You know, I'm possibly thinking trying Egoscue, which is a program that my dad has been on for a while, and he said it has helped. Definitely hasn't gotten rid of it. Like I look at his pelvis and his pelvis still looks really uneven. You know, I kind of want to do a couple more x-rays on my lower back, because the spine cord doctor did make kind of a throwaway statement that was just kind of like, oh, look at that, your lower back, your vertebrae is never fully separated. I was like, what? So I'm kind of wondering, like, could that have anything to do with like the rotation? Because that's basically what's going on in my pelvis. It's rotated back and it's down. So yeah, that's pretty much it. When I look down, I see that my pelvis is like that, and it's like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And that was the other thing with the atlas, was that they theorized that like if your atlas is off and it places your head to the side or something, that your body will not allow you to walk around like this. So you'll compensate to try to keep your eyes even with the horizon, and then it causes a chain reaction all the way down your body. I have had a lot of head injuries over the course of my life, like just weird things like hitting my head on a diving board and stuff like that. So like I said, if this just ends up helping and now my physical therapy ends up being super effective and I'm like miraculously healed, I won't be that shocked in the sense that like, this actually makes sense. But I also will be shocked because it's such a tiny little thing and I'm like, all of these problems like from that. So I am gonna do like another update, and I mean I can do one right after this if you guys have like specific questions. I hope this wasn't the most boring video in the world. So yeah guys, that's it. I'm going to sign off on this video now. I hope that it was helpful, interesting, or enjoyable to you. Wrong words, I don't even know how to sign off on this, but that's it. I'm gonna go now. Oh, I hate sign offs, I always feel so awkward, so I'll see you later. Okay, bye.